Christmas used to be my favorite time of year. The twinkling lights, the smell of cinnamon and clove, the illusion that for a few days, everyone in my family might set aside their sharp edges and play nice. I held onto that hope like it was sacred, even as the years stacked up with proof to the contrary. But nothing prepared me for last Christmas, the one that made me question everything I ever believed about generosity, family, and what people really mean when they say, it's the thought that counts. It started the way they always do me: over planning, over buying, over caring. I'd booked a week-long beach vacation as a surprise gift for my cousin Danielle and her husband. An all-inclusive resort in Tulum, something they'd been talking about for years but never seemed able to swing. I did it not just to be generous, but because I genuinely believed it would make her happy. And maybe, just maybe, show her I wasn't the selfish one she always made me out to be. Danielle's always had this way of making me feel like too much and never enough at the same time. The kind of person who gives you a compliment that comes wrapped in a backhand. You look great. Have you finally stopped eating out so much? Or, I wish I had time to throw together a holiday like this. You must not have a lot going on. It's subtle, sharp, but not quite loud enough to call out without sounding petty. And Christmas. Christmas is her stage. So when the morning came and we all gathered in my living room, gifts under the tree, hot cider on the stove, I still held out hope. I handed her the envelope with the resort confirmation printed inside, tied with a red ribbon. She opened it, read the details, and smiled, tight-lipped, like she'd just bitten into something sour. Oh, wow. She said, a vacation. That's generous. That was it. No hug. No thank you. No excitement. She set the envelope down like it was a bill she hadn't asked for. Then came the kicker, when the rest of the family started exchanging gifts. Danielle handed me a card. Just a card. Inside, Merry Christmas. Let's catch up soon. D, no gift. Not even a candle. And when I laughed, a little stunned, she said with a smirk, I figured you probably already bought yourself everything you wanted. Like usual. I felt it like a slap, a public slap, delivered with the audience of my parents, my brother, and a few aunts who pretended not to notice. I nodded, said nothing, but something inside me cracked open, something I'd been holding back for years. And by New Year's, I canceled that resort reservation, quietly, efficiently, without fanfare. Danielle didn't find out until 2 weeks before the trip. And the storm that followed. It made Christmas look like a warm-up. Danielle's voicemail came in hot. She didn't even try to sound calm. What do you mean it's canceled? You said it was booked. I've already told people we're going. I sat on my couch, mug of chamomile in hand, staring at the blinking red light on the answering machine like it was a live grenade. She had waited 3 weeks to acknowledge the gift. And now, when it vanished, it suddenly mattered. I didn't reply right away. I let her words settle like dust, giving myself permission to feel the weight of what had happened. The resentment, the humiliation, the realization that my kindness had always been her leverage. That night, I reread the confirmation email one last time before officially clicking cancel. The resort's policy gave me back 75% of the cost. The rest, I considered the price of clarity. 2 days later, she cornered me at Aunt Sylvia's birthday party. You're unbelievable, she hissed, trying to keep her voice low enough to not draw attention. You made me look like a liar. I sipped my wine. No, Danielle, you did that all on your own. Her eyes flared. It was a gift. You can't just take it back. That wasn't a gift. That was a favor I gave in good faith, I said evenly. One you took with all the grace of a parking ticket. She blinked, stunned for a second. before masking it with a scoff. So what? This is punishment for not kissing your feet on Christmas morning. No, I said, leaning in just enough. This is the moment I stopped pretending you cared. And then I walked away, not fast, not flustered, just done. The fallout came like a slow leak. Muted conversations at family dinners. A cousin texting me, "Are you okay?" As if I'd committed some crime. My mother, always the peacemaker, tried to spin it like a misunderstanding, but I didn't backpedal. Didn't explain. I didn't owe anyone that. Danielle's version of the story spread. Of course. She made it sound like I was unhinged. She canceled a whole trip because I didn't buy her a present. She cried to anyone who'd listen. But truth has a way of settling. Eventually, the people who mattered, the ones who'd sat through years of Danielle's digs and barbed compliments, started to ask quieter questions. Did she really say that? Why didn't she say thank you? That trip sounded amazing. And slowly, subtly, the tide shifted. It wasn't vindication, not yet, but it was movement. I didn't want revenge. Not really. I just wanted respect. Or maybe I wanted to feel like being generous didn't make me a fool. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. The wound was open. And Danielle, she wasn't going to let it scab over without a fight. The texts came next, dozens of them, spread over days, each one more acidic than the last. "You're so dramatic. Can't believe you're ruining our family over a vacation. Must be nice. Having money to burn and still acting like the victim." I didn't respond. Not once. Because that's the thing. With people like Danielle, they feed on the response. They twist every syllable into ammo. I wasn't giving her more. Instead, I went quiet. And in that silence, something remarkable happened. My cousin James, who had always hovered around the edges of our gatherings like background noise, reached out. We met for coffee neutral ground, and he didn't waste time. "She's been pulling this crap for years," he said, stirring his coffee like it had personally offended him. "But no one ever says anything, because it's easier to let her run her mouth than deal with the tantrum." I sipped mine slowly. And now, he looked up. "Now people are talking. Quietly?" "Yeah, but you cracked something open." I leaned back, letting his words settle. I didn't set out to start a war, but I wasn't going to apologize for being the first one who stopped playing nice. Christmas had always been a performance. We wore smiles like armor, past presents like currency, and endured Danielle's undercutting comments with tight-lipped laughs. But not this time. This time, the curtain had fallen, and no one knew what to do with the silence that followed. 2 weeks later, my mom asked if I was planning to come to Danielle's makeup dinner. I blinked. "Excuse me, she invited everyone," she said softly. "She's calling it a do-over. No gifts, just family. She wants to clear the air." I nearly choked on my tea. A do-over. This woman had mocked my generosity, humiliated me in front of our entire family, played the victim after being called out, and now she wanted to wipe the slate clean with breadsticks and a salad course. "I'm not going," I said. Mom frowned. "I just don't want this to divide the family." "It's been divided," I said. I'm just the first one who stopped pretending the cracks weren't there. I saw the hurt in her eyes, the weight of tradition and peacekeeping worn into the lines on her face. But I couldn't do it. Not for her. Not for anyone. Some relationships only survive because we water them with our silence. And I'd finally gone dry. The night of the dinner, I lit a candle in my apartment, poured a glass of wine, and made myself the meal I'd originally planned to serve. On Christmas Day, rosemary lamb, roasted garlic potatoes, wine-braised carrots, all the little things Danielle never saw because she was too busy tearing down what I built. I ate in peace, for the first time in a long time. And when my phone buzzed with a photo from the dinner, half the table empty. Danielle smiling too wide for a crowd that clearly wasn't buying it. I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. Revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's just not showing up. The days that followed were quieter than I expected. No angry texts, no vague social media jabs, no sudden phone calls from aunts caught in the middle. Danielle's silence was unfamiliar and unsettling. For someone who lived to dominate the group chat, the hush felt like the eye of a storm. A calculated pause before the next move. I kept my distance, guarded but curious. I wasn't naive enough to think she was done. No, Danielle didn't just roll over. She regrouped. It wasn't long before I heard the next beat of her campaign through my brother. Of course, who never asked to be the family messenger, but always ended up delivering bad news like it was takeout. She's throwing a birthday dinner, he said one night over the phone, chewing loudly into the receiver. Big one. Supposedly her treat. I raised an eyebrow. Since when does Danielle pay for anything? She says it's her way of reinvesting in relationships. Her words, not mine. I scoffed. More like damage control. You going? No, I said. I'm not buying into the rebrand. He went quiet. Then, you sure? It might be easier to just let it go. I wanted to scream. Let it go. It wasn't about a canceled vacation. It wasn't about a card without a gift or a snide comment over cider. It was about years of invisible bruises, of showing up, giving everything, and being told it wasn't enough because it didn't fit her version of love. Where control passed for affection and sarcasm passed for intimacy. And now, because I'd finally broken the script, she wanted to write a new one, but not with me in it. No, Danielle didn't want reconciliation. She wanted absolution, a fresh image, a clean slate. And I was the stain she couldn't scrub out. So I stayed home again. And this time, I didn't feel noble about it. I felt angry. Because here's the thing. They don't tell you about standing up for yourself. It's lonely. People want you to be kind, forgiving, gracious. They want you to absorb the hurt so they don't have to deal with the discomfort of calling it what it is. Abuse wrapped in holiday ribbon. So, when the photos from the birthday dinner rolled in, filtered and fake, Danielle beaming, like she'd never lost sleep over a single soul, I didn't smile. I sat in my kitchen, phone face down, appetite gone, and I asked myself, not for the first time, did cutting her off give me peace? Or did it just leave me with empty chairs? That night, I didn't sleep much because revenge is never as clean as you want it to be. Even when you win, you bleed a little too. The next time I saw her was at Grandma's house. It was a Sunday, family lunch, one of those long-standing traditions where the food is always heavy and the conversation is always light on purpose. Everyone showed up like we were filming some outdated sitcom, laugh track included. I almost didn't go, but Grandma had called earlier in the week, her voice tinny with age but sharp as ever. I miss your face, she said, and I'm not picking sides. She didn't have to. I went for her. I brought a dessert lemon tart with lavender whipped cream, something that required too much effort for people who would barely notice. But it helped me breathe to make it. Danielle was already there when I arrived, wearing white, always white, like she needed the world to see her as pure. Her hair pulled into that tight, gleaming ponytail she wore when she wanted control over the narrative. Her smile when she saw me was all teeth. Look who decided to show up, she said across the room. The table fell quiet for a second. Then someone laughed nervously. Uncle Rob coughed. My mom offered me a plate like it was a life raft. I ignored Danielle. took a seat, poured water, passed a bowl. I didn't come here to fight, but I wasn't shrinking either. The conversation picked back up kids, work, the usual safe zones. Danielle kept her eyes on me, waiting, baiting. I knew the look. She was starving for a chance to rewrite the scene in front of the only audience that mattered. Family. Halfway through the meal, she finally snapped. So, she said loudly, "Did you ever get around to rebooking that vacation? Or did you spend the refund on scented candles and petty pride?" You could hear the fork drop. Literally. Aunt Marie froze. Mid-bite. I looked at her. Straight on. Calm. "No," I said. Voice steady. "I donated part of it to the women's shelter downtown. The rest went to my savings." Danielle blinked. She hadn't expected that. I leaned forward slightly, still soft, but clear. Turns out, peace and boundaries cost less than a trip to Mexico. She flushed, tried to recover with a chuckle. "Well, aren't you noble?" "No," I said. "I'm just done rewarding bad behavior." Grandma cleared her throat. "Enough," she said, soft. But with that steel, everyone respected. Danielle sat back. The rest of the meal passed in silence between us. But my chest felt lighter. Not because I'd put her in her place. Not because anyone clapped or cheered or told me I was right. But because I didn't fold. I didn't make myself smaller for someone else's comfort. Later, as I washed dishes with Grandma in the kitchen, she handed me a towel and said, "Took you long enough." I smiled. "Took me everything," I whispered. And maybe that was the truth of it. Revenge doesn't always come in fire. Sometimes it comes in finally taking your seat without asking for permission. In the weeks that followed, Danielle went quiet again. Not the simmering silence she used as a weapon, but the brittle kind, like a porcelain plate perched too close to the edge. One wrong word and it would shatter. I didn't hear from her, and no one brought her up in conversation anymore. At least not when I was around. The air felt thinner, like people were holding their breath, waiting for someone to break the new normal. I didn't. Instead, I started filling my time with people who didn't make me feel like I had to earn affection. Brunches with coworkers who actually asked how I was doing and listened for the answer. Quiet evenings with my friend Lena, watching bad movies and laughing until our stomachs hurt. Long walks with my dog through the park without checking my phone every 5 minutes. Waiting for the next emotional landmine. It was peaceful, but it wasn't perfect. There were nights I'd lie awake replaying it all, every barb. Every moment I'd stayed silent to keep the peace. And then, the way her face twisted when I finally pushed back. Not because I felt guilty for what I did, but because I hated that it came to this. I hated that family had to become a battlefield. That loving someone didn't always mean letting them stay. One night, as spring began to thaw the cold from the sidewalks, my mom stopped by with a Tupperware full of stew and eyes that carried too much unsaid. We sat on the couch, and after a while, she exhaled like she'd been holding it in since Christmas. "She misses you," she said. I didn't respond. "She won't say it," she added. "But I know her. You two, you were close once." I nodded slowly. We were, and that was the tragedy of it all. Because Danielle and I weren't just cousins. We were inseparable once, grew up like sisters, built blanket forts and made up dance routines in Grandma's living room. We laughed so hard, we used to cry. We told each other secrets no one else knew. Somewhere along the way, that closeness morphed into competition. She didn't know how to love without measuring. I didn't know how to pull away without guilt. But I knew this now. Love without respect is not love. It's performance. "She's hosting Easter," Mom said carefully. "Just family." I told her you probably wouldn't come. But she didn't say no. I looked down at my lap, fingers curling into fists. "She's not sorry," I whispered. "No," Mom admitted. But maybe she's not ready to be. Doesn't mean you have to carry the weight of it. I nodded, slow, and for the first time, I realized I didn't need Danielle to admit she was wrong. I just needed to stop waiting for her to become someone else. That was the cost of my revenge. I didn't just lose her, I lost the illusion that she ever really saw me. But in its place, something stronger had taken root. I had started seeing myself. Easter arrived like a test I hadn't studied for. I told myself I wouldn't go, that I had nothing to prove. That staying home was the new boundary I'd carved into stone. But as the day crept closer, so did the itch under my skin, the one that said, maybe you should show up. Just to see, not to make peace, not to make a scene, just to look her in the eye. I wore blue, not soft, not loud just enough to feel like myself. I brought lemon bars, wrapped in parchment, knowing full well no one would say thank you. When I stepped into Grandma's house, the smell of baked ham and tulips hit me like a wave of nostalgia and grief. For a second, I was 12 again, hunting eggs with Danielle in the backyard, laughing until we collapsed on the grass. But those girls were long gone. Now, we were women who had survived each other. She was already in the kitchen, stirring something, face set in the kind of practiced calm she wore, like foundation. When she turned and saw me, her mouth twitched. Not a smile, not a sneer, just acknowledgement. Hey, she said. Hey. It was neutral, safe. Like two colleagues who once shared something soft. Now speaking through plexiglass, the family buzzed around us, clinking glasses and talking too loud. The tension between us was a secret everyone could feel, but no one named. That was always the family way. Avoid, avoid. Perform. Halfway through dinner, she stood to make a toast. Of course she did. Danielle always loved a captive audience. She tapped her glass and smiled. Too wide. I just want to thank everyone for being here, for showing up, for sticking through the messy stuff. Family isn't always easy, but it's always ours. I could see the performance in her eyes, the way she looked at me without looking at me, as if her words could rewrite our past, like a second take on a scene she didn't like. Polite applause followed, a few nods. I didn't clap. After dessert, we found ourselves alone on the back porch. The others were inside, laughing over old family videos. She lit a cigarette. Even though no one smoked anymore, I didn't think you'd come, she said, voice low. Neither did I. Silence stretched between us. Then, she said, I was hurt. You embarrassed me. You humiliated me for years, I replied. I just finally stopped applauding. Her jaw tightened. She took a long drag and looked out into the yard, where our childhood still lived in ghosts. I'm not going to say sorry, she said. I didn't expect you to, but I will say this. Her voice cracked. Just a little. It used to be easier. With you. Before everything got sharp. I nodded. I know. She flicked ash off the porch, then glanced at me. Do you miss it? The old us. Sometimes, I admitted. But I don't miss being small. She looked down. Neither of us said anything after that, because there are wounds that don't close. Only quiet. And maybe that's the best we'll ever get. The porch light flickered above us, casting shadows that made Danielle look older, not tired. Exactly. Just worn in places I'd never noticed before. Her shoulders sagged under a weight I recognized. The strain of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I thought we were closer than this, she said finally. I laughed, but not unkindly. We were until we weren't. She looked like she might argue, like she might reach for the usual deflection jokes. It's sarcasm, maybe even that thin layer of denial she wore like lipstick. But she didn't. She just stared out into the backyard where, once upon a time, we played like the world would never change. Everyone always acted like you were the delicate one. She muttered, the sweet one. But you've got teeth. I turned toward her, meeting her gaze without flinching. No one's delicate forever, Danielle. Some of us just get tired of being bit. That landed. She nodded slowly, almost like she respected it, or at least understood it in a way she hadn't before. Then she did something unexpected. She handed me her cigarette. I didn't smoke, never had, but I took it anyway. Not to use it, just to hold it. A gesture exchanged between two people who had stopped speaking the same language long ago and were now fumbling for a new one. Inside, laughter swelled. The clatter of dishes, the muffled echo of someone retelling the story of how I fell off the trampoline when I was 8. Grandma's house never changed. Not really. Only the people in it did. Danielle broke the silence. I'm not going to fix overnight. I looked down at the half-burned cigarette in my fingers. I don't need overnight. She swallowed hard. Then, what do you need? And for once, I didn't want to lash out. I didn't want to score points or sting her with the kind of words she used to whip around like party favors. I need consistency, I said. Respect, a little softness, and honesty, even if it's messy. She looked at me like I'd just spoken another language. But there was something else too, maybe. Not understanding, but recognition. I'll try, she said. And I believed her, not because she said it well, or because she looked repentant, but because for the first time she didn't try to win. She didn't twist it into something about her. She just showed up in whatever broken way she could. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But when we walked back into the house together, our shoulders brushed. And for the first time since Christmas, I didn't feel like I had to armor myself. The vacation was still gone. The words were still said. But maybe, just maybe, something else was starting in its place. Something quieter, more honest, harder, but real. A week passed before she texted. Just one line. Dinner next week, just us. I stared at it for a long time. There was no emoji, no passive-aggressive subtext, no performative flair, just a question plain. Direct, uncertain. The kind of text you send when you're not sure you'll get a reply, when you know you haven't earned one yet. I didn't answer right away. Not because I wanted to punish her, but because I needed to be sure. Sure that I wasn't walking back into a pattern wearing new makeup. I sat with it, carried it around like a warm stone in my pocket, weighing its sincerity against everything I'd learned since that hollow Christmas morning. Eventually, I said yes, not to forgive her, but to allow something new. We met at a quiet little restaurant halfway between our neighborhoods. Neutral territory. No fanfare. When she arrived, she wasn't late. And for once, she didn't make a comment about my outfit or the price of the wine. She hugged me, briefly, stiffly, like someone practicing something foreign. And we sat. We didn't pretend nothing had happened, but we didn't dissect it either. Instead, she asked questions, real ones, about work, about my friends, about what I'd been reading lately. Her phone stayed in her purse. Her tone was soft. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was on a witness stand with a smile glued to my face. She ordered dessert, something we used to share as kids. A warm bread pudding we always fought over at Grandma's. I still think you used to sneak the last bite when no one was looking, she said with a grin. I definitely did. We laughed. Genuinely. And it surprised me how easy it was. Once the walls weren't so high, once the roles we'd both learned to play weren't dictating every move. When the check came, she reached for it without hesitation. I've got it, she said. I raised an eyebrow. You sure? Yeah, she said. It's not a trade. It's not a trap. It's just dinner. And that simple statement, just dinner, did more to rebuild trust than any apology might have, because it meant she didn't see me as a transaction anymore. On the walk to our cars, she paused under a street lamp, the light catching on her face in a way that made her look both older and younger somehow. "I can't promise I won't mess up," she said, "but I want to get better at this." "With you?" I nodded. "I do too." We hugged again, longer, this time, and as I drove home, I realized something I hadn't known I was waiting to feel. The revenge wasn't the cancellation. It wasn't the confrontation. It wasn't even the quiet strength I'd found afterward. The real revenge was becoming someone she had to earn back. It's funny how the things that once burned brightest in your chest start to fade. Not because they stop mattering, but because they stop owning you. I think about that Christmas sometimes, not with rage, not even with sadness, just clarity. I think about the envelope she left unopened on the floor, her shrug, the smirk, the sting of her words. I remember the cold that crept into my body as I stood there trying to keep my dignity while something broke behind my ribs. That version of me, the one who bent over backward for scraps of respect, she's gone. She left the moment I canceled that trip. And while I may have lost the version of family I used to cling to, I gained something truer in return, myself. Unedited, the months since have been different. Danielle and I still speak. Not every day, not like sisters, but like people who know better now, who understand the edges of each other and try not to push too hard. She sends me random recipes now, sometimes memes, sometimes silence, and that's okay, because we stopped pretending things were perfect, and that made space for something honest to grow. At Thanksgiving, she brought a bottle of wine and a warm loaf of bread. No digs, no drama. She complimented the table, thanked me for the invite, washed dishes without being asked. And when no one was looking, she nudged me and said, "The lemon tart is still your thing. Don't worry, I'll never compete." It was a joke, but it wasn't. It was her way of saying, "I see you now." And for me, that was enough. Not because it erased the past, but because it proved something I'd spent years aching to believe. People can change, even the ones who cut the deepest, but only when you stop letting them bleed you out for free. Hey now, I give with an open heart and open eyes. I still host holidays. I still show up, but I don't overextend. I don't wait for applause. I don't measure my worth by what people give back. Because revenge taught me something love never did. Respect starts with boundaries and peace. Peace is not something you wait for. It's something you choose. That Christmas may have shattered the illusion, but it handed me back the pieces I needed to build something real. And for that, I'm grateful, even to her.